Good afternoon. My name is Earthryn Cousin, and I'm a distinguished fellow on global food and agriculture at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Thank you all for joining us today, especially our members, via today's Zoom call, which is an on-the-record program. If you'd like to submit a question today to today's panel, please visit CCGA Live. As a reminder, the Council is a nonprofit, independent, and nonpartisan platform. The views expressed by individuals we host are their own and do not represent institutional positions or views of the Council. So let's get started. In the US, our food system is efficient, but not agile. Some would even say it's broken. One part of our food system supports from farm to retail the consumer purchase of food. The second part supports institutional food from farm to institution, restaurants, schools, hotels. The coronavirus pandemic illuminated the challenges in this seemingly efficient food system. With the closure of restaurants and schools, we witnessed a breakdown in our two-pronged structure. Simply put, farmers with no markets were forced to plow under vegetables and other produce, purge livestock, and pour milk down drains, while families, suddenly without income, lined up for blocks for limited food distributions. As a result, hunger increased. Researchers at Northwestern estimate that food insecurity has more than doubled due to the economic crisis brought on by the pandemic, hitting as many as 23% of households throughout the 2020 and 2021. Especially troubling is that millions more children are facing food insecurity. Food insecurity has nearly tripled to 29.5% among households with children. And a recent Pew study found that Black and Hispanic households were 3 times more likely to have gone to a food bank compared to a white family. What this means is that for a third of all American households, food access was limited, resulting in a disruption of diet and eating patterns and a greater reliance on food assistance programs. While the livelihoods of many small and medium farmers were threatened. In April 2020, in response to that livelihood challenge, the US Department of Agriculture launched the Farmers to Family Box Program as part of the coronavirus food assistance program to support both farmers and people who lack the resources to access the food they need. $15 billion has been spent to date on the program. And now USDA has another $1.5 billion at its disposal for a new round of contracts. But under the new administration, under the Biden administration, officials are considering replacing the existing model and making changes to address some of the challenges that we witnessed with the program. Our panel will share an in-depth discussion on the program's success, unintended consequences, and opportunities, and recommendation for future iterations of the program to ensure that it not only alleviates hunger, but inclusively supports a more diverse group of agricultural stakeholders. Today's program, however, will start with an opening remarks by our Senator, Dick Durbin. After our panelists, after the senator's remarks, our panelists will have 15 minutes of Q&A with him. This is a real treat for the members of the panel. The panelists, I will introduce them more fully later, but Melissa Mulshinker, Ackerman, Emily Broad-Lee, Basil I. Gooden, and Kate Mayer are the panelists who will join us in asking questions of the senator. But first, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce you to our keynote speaker today, my friend, Senator Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin, from the state of Illinois, of course, has served in this role since 1996. He serves as the Senate Majority Whip, the second highest ranking position amongst the Senate Democrats and the second highest ranking position in the Senate itself. He sits on a number of committees, including the Judiciary Committee, and of importance to today's conversation, the Agriculture Committee. Senator Durbin, over to you.
Earthen, thanks, and good morning and afternoon now to everyone with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Thanks for hosting this important and timely discussion on the USDA's Farmers to Families Food Box Program. I want to thank Earthen especially, a close personal friend of many, many years, who has been involved in this battle, not just here in Illinois, in the Midwest, in our nation, but on a global basis. What an extraordinary public servant she has been and continues to be. I want to thank the entire panel and give a shout out to Kate Mayer, my buddy. So many times we've worked together to try to make sure the federal dollars were being spent in the proper way. Your leadership and management skills at the Greater Chicago Food Depository are now legendary. I'm happy to count you as a friend, and I'm glad that you'll be able to make a contribution to this panel today. Well, we're not out of the woods yet. This pandemic is far from over, but with more shots in the arms and more money in the pockets of Americans who are struggling, we can see there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But what have we learned after over a year of circumstances none of us could have ever predicted? What have we learned? Well, it'll take years, maybe generations, to really answer that question. And this pandemic year may change America in ways we can't even imagine today. We're just getting a hint at what might happen. Thanks to Ambassador Cousin and Chicago Council, to Harvard Law School's Food, Law, and Policy Clinic, to the panelists and others, we're going to try to draw some conclusions on the USDA's Farmers to Families Food Box Program. So let me give you a word of warning. If you're standing, and I don't think many are, but if you're standing, it's time to sit down, because I'm about to say something that'll have you fall back into your chair. When it comes down to the food box program, I think the Trump administration got it right. That's right. Durbin, this Democrat, said it, and I mean it. On the whole, the food box program has proven remarkably effective at helping America's families and food distributors weather the worst public and economic crisis in our time. And I think when I read the Harvard study and their conclusions, it bears out that conclusion. My first measurement for any anti-hunger program is this: is the food really reaching the people who need it? With the food box program, the answer is largely yes. Hunger in America has surged in this pandemic, reaching an estimated 1 in 4 families. Over the last year, America's food pantries have distributed roughly 50% more food than they did the previous year, the year before the pandemic. Here in our area, Kate, I understand that 57% of the food distributed by the Greater Chicago Food Depository came from the Farm Box program. In some rural areas of the nation, the food box program accounted for as much as 80% of all charitable food distribution. 154 million boxes of fresh meat, produce, and dairy products delivered to hungry families. It's remarkable. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the workers and volunteers at the Greater Chicago Food Depository, food banks, food pantries, soup kitchens all across the nation, and to all the folks joining us by Zoom. In this pandemic, you really were the first responders. Your efforts have made a huge difference to millions of people. To all of the emergency food workers who may be joining by Zoom, thank you. In this pandemic, you truly were the first responders. Now, the food box program was introduced to me in general terms, in legislative terms, in Washington. But I saw it firsthand when I was in Champaign, Illinois, at a Central Illinois Food Distribution Depository. And I was standing there and we were looking at the usual things you expect in a food depository: food stacked to the rafters and people moving it and making sure it's being distributed. And then along came these boxes, and it looked to me almost like a gift box of food. I thought to myself, by means of presentation, this is really an inviting gift of good quality food, well arranged and distributed. And you could have said, well, they could have saved a few dollars by not putting it into the box that they did to deliver it, or put it in a different way. They could have I thought to myself, the heck with that explanation. The people who are receiving this should receive a box of food that they believe is quality food they can feed their family. and not be ashamed and humbled by it, but accept the reality. There are times when all of us will reach a point of struggle and need a helping hand. And in this point, the American family, writ large, came to the rescue of many other families and did it in a proper way. The Food Box Program also created a new market for America's farmers and agricultural producers. So as Earthman said, they didn't have to dump their milk, let their crops rot, euthanize animals when restaurants and other big buyers shut down. The third benefit of the Food Box Program, is that food distributors were able to keep their workers on the job, and in some cases increase their payroll in order to get food products in their boxes to the destinations where they needed to be delivered. Is there room for improvement? Yes. And the Harvard study is very candid in that regard. I thank them for their reality check when it comes to some of the aspects of the program. As a member of the Senate's Agriculture Committee and the Appropriations Committee, I thought the analysis by the Harvard Law School's Food Law and Policy Clinic was well worth reading. Now, I'm a Democrat, and many people think that's all about tax and spend, but I was mentored in the art of politics, if we can call it that, by two extraordinary men. One was named Paul Douglas, an economist with the University of Chicago, who went on to serve in not only in the military during World War II, but to serve in the United States Senate. He was the head of the Joint Economic Committee, and he was a man who believed that you didn't have to be wasteful to be a liberal. And I've learned my lesson from him. And the practical application of politics came from another man named Paul Simon, who was my predecessor in the United States Senate. He was a caring man, but he was tighter than the bark on a tree. He drove old Chevys around until the wheels fell off of him, and he wore suits that should have been retired years before. But when it came to government money, he felt the same way. You just don't waste it. It's yours to spend wisely. The panelists today are going to talk to us about whether we spent money wisely or could do it more wisely. We did say, I'm especially interested in the ideas of how to engage smaller farmers, medium-sized farmers, minority and women-owned producers and distributors fairly and equitably in the program. Remember the PPP program that we started with the CARES Act back in March of last year? We went to this SBA, and the SBA went to the banks, and the bank's first stop was with their known clients, their known customers. They knew what their business situations were, and so the first round of PPP loans went to rather well-off and well-established businesses. Not that they weren't struggling, but we missed a whole category of businesses, of people who were not really well banked and people who were not in the system, but were managing to struggle with enough entrepreneurial spirit to get by. So the second round, we had to democratize the PPP program, and I think we did it for the better. We also need to make sure that the contracts in the Food Box Program and any successor programs go to the best bidder, not simply the lowest bidder. We've got to see that these food boxes actually are delivered where they're needed. I remember 20, 30 years ago, the cheese distribution, what was going on there, and you do too. Some people got a big chunk of cheese. I don't know what they did with it. It was so large. The federal portions were so large. And some people took the cheese and filled the trunks of their car and went out and sold it. And it happens. It breaks your heart to think that's going on, but it does every time. We've got to make sure we put everything we can into systems to make sure there's oversight and accountability. Let me also add an element that all of us are taking to heart in reducing food waste. That is something I'm sure that everyone in this business knows is a heartbreaker, to think that what we have could have been a source of food for people who desperately need it, and now has turned into an environmental challenge. I think the Food Box Program is really important to help farmers and families recover. I agree the program should serve as a template of what we need to do moving forward. And one last thought. President Biden's American Rescue Plan extends the current 15% increase in SNAP benefits through September. Don't forget SNAP. Don't forget the traditional role of food depositories. All of these are critically important. We also, in the American Rescue Plan, provided direct stimulus payments to families. When we think that the average African-American family in America has a savings account of $500, that's all they have to fall back on. If the car breaks down or there's a medical bill or some other family catastrophe, they were receiving checks $600 and $1,400. We can only hope that that money comes to the rescue of a lot of families who struggle paycheck to paycheck. We also put in place emergency assistance to prevent eviction and foreclosure. Having a food bank is a wonderful thing, but it starts with a roof over your head to feed your family. Assistance with health insurance premiums, aid to state and local tribal governments so they don't have to lay off more workers, aid to school districts, more PPP loans, money for restaurants, which we need. But the president's rescue plan is more than a COVID relief plan. He moved us forward in areas that I think really get to the heart of the clientele we're talking about, the American families. This plan by the president, his American Rescue Plan, is the most ambitious poverty reduction program in America in 60 years. It begins to reverse 4 decades of policy mistakes that left millions of Americans and millions of children poor and hungry, even before the pandemic. One piece of the plan, just one piece, the increased child tax credit, we believe can cut child poverty in America in half. Now, politicians make bold statements, and that's a pretty bold statement. But if we calculate this correctly, families will now be above the poverty line for the first time, half of them when they have kids. Now, we're never going to end hunger entirely, but we certainly can reduce the number of hungry people in America. With a thriving economy, which we hope to restore very soon, rewards for honest work and treating people fairly and with dignity. With that, let me thank your organizations for all you have done, and let me answer a few questions if I can.
Terrific. Senator, I promised your staff we would let you go by 12:20. Do you have time for a couple questions from our panel?
Earthrun, have I ever said no to you?
Makes me so happy. Okay, let me start I'll start and asking you a question related to, as you said, let's not forget the existing programs. Let's not also forget that many of these families are working people who can't afford to feed their families. What is the likelihood, and what do we need to do to support that likelihood of increasing the minimum wage to a living wage?
We had a setback. We hoped to put it in this American Rescue Plan, and the president asked for it. And we had to take a process. We had a choice. We could take the American Rescue Plan to the floor of the Senate, subject to a filibuster, which means you had to put together 60 votes. And at the end of the day, we would have seen a much different plan than the one that was enacted. Instead, we went through something called reconciliation in the Senate, which means the filibuster doesn't apply, and it's a majority vote, and Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker as vice president and presiding over the Senate. So the president in his original proposal put in an increase in the minimum wage. For those of us in Illinois, it really mirrored what we have in the state. The goal by 2025 of reaching $15 an hour, which I think is the right goal to get people at least with something close to a livable wage, $15 an hour. The parliamentarian of the Senate looked at it and said it doesn't fit within the 4 corners of the restitution procedure, so you can't include it. Disappointing, but I don't think the conversation's over. I've been approached by Republican senators who want to increase the current federal minimum wage, which I believe is $7.25 or $7.50 an hour. They want to increase that dramatically. Some 27 states, that's all they have. They don't have, as Illinois does, a plan to go to $15 an hour. They live under the federal minimum wage. So my thinking, Earthrun, is as a Democrat, if we can sit down with enough Republicans and come through with a substantial increase, maybe not as generous as the original minimum wage proposal, but one that will help families, we ought to take it. And let's hope that political circumstances change for the better in the near future, and we can go back to the president's original proposal.
Well, that means that's music to the ears of a lot of Americans, I know. Next question. Who wants to be first? All right, Melissa, go ahead.
Okay. Senator Durbin, thank you so much for being here today. As a supplier for the Farmers to Family program, this was a huge win in many ways for many people, and we really appreciate it. Do you see a program like this, as you said, as a blueprint maybe during just emergency times, or as something that could be an add-on to some typical programs as well for the long term?
Melissa, that's the right question to ask. Does this program have legs? Is it just an emergency pandemic program, and we go back to the regular sources and such? And that's what I'm going to really hand it off to Kate and others who are on your panel, because they're the ones who can tell you whether this could be integrated and whether it makes sense to integrate it into the system that we have established nationwide. Food pantries and food distribution systems. Does it make sense for us to continue to do this on a dollar basis? Some people said we were spending between $40 and $100 a box when it came right down to it, billions of dollars into millions of boxes. I don't know if that's the right number or not. Our friends from Harvard can tell you if it's close. Some say, well, the contents of the box are only worth $20. Why do we have to pay twice as much at a minimum? And I'll go back to my original point. If that is an accurate observation, I still think there's value in the presentation of this to people and a feeling that they're being treated with respect. I really think there's some value to that. And I want to defer the real answer to that question to the people who do this for a living. I keep calling on Kate and she's smiling at me.
We're going to get
maybe
to her.
She could help me answer the question.
Yeah.
Kate, what do you think?
Well, I have a question of my own that I wanted to I know we only have a few minutes. You were, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your leadership. You have been such a fierce advocate on behalf of men and women and children who face hunger, not just in this state, but in this country. And I am so grateful for that. You talked about SNAP, and I believe you're right. We need several tools to respond to the crisis that we have been in and that we will likely continue to be in for some time. And I want to build on the question that Earthrin asked, which is, as we look at the road in front of us, what do you think the likelihood is that we can see this 15% increase in SNAP become permanent, as well as some of the other innovations that have happened? We can now use SNAP online, and I know that you've been out at the forefront of really thinking about how we can continue to make that a change for sort of permanent good. What is the likelihood we can see those investments happening?
I think it's good, Kate. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be naive in thinking this, but once this money through the tax credits goes out to families and to help children, once the SNAP benefits have reached the new level, I really believe we're in a stronger position for arguing to continue it rather than to try to create it anew. But we're going to have to show results for it. We have to make sure that we do the best we can to make sure it is administered well. And I know that's what you do for a living every single day. But that's going to make the difference. If it is a credible program that has made a measurable impact on the lives of children and families, I think we have a good chance of extending it.
Well, Senator, I want to appreciate your time and thank you for not only being here today, but being the voice and the leader on so many of these issues related to ensuring not only that no American goes hungry, but that every child in America has the opportunity to live their life to their full potential. And I appreciate you as my friends, and as my senator and as a leader in this country. And your leadership is one that we not only admire, but we salute and support. So thank you.
Thanks, Earthrin. And I will just say that I want to give credit to one of my colleagues who has such passion on this issue, and that's Debbie Stabenow, who is now the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee. We couldn't have a better friend for all the causes that we're discussing than Debbie Stabenow. And I'm glad she is there and really cares so much about this. And thank goodness, I'll say this politically, you would expect it, but I mean it. Thank goodness for a president who cares and a vice president who cares. It really helps. And we are going to use our majorities to make a difference in the lives of people, as all of you do every single day. Thanks for letting me join you.
Terrific. Thank you, Senator. Bye-bye. Now, to our panel and to our audience, first of all, let me ask you to go to ccga.live to ask your questions of the panel. and also to put in any comments that you would like to include to ensure that we hear the voices of those who are listening with us here today. But let me begin by introducing very briefly those who you've seen on your screen so far who make up today's panel. First of all, we have Melinda mulshinker Ackerman. Melinda is the president of the Produce Alliance, a national produce company specializing in consulting and purchasing of produce from field to fork. And the Produce Alliance has been a contractor to the Farm to Box program. Emily Broadleib, you heard Emily mentioned by work a number of times by Senator Durbin. Emily serves as the director of the Food Law and Policy Clinic at Harvard Law School, the first law school clinic in the nation devoted to providing clients with legal and policy solutions to address the health, economic, and environmental challenges facing our food system, and the author of the report that was referred to by the senator on the Farm to Box program, which we'll talk to her about in today's conversation. Basil I. Gooden. Basil is, first of all, a farmer. And we could not have had this panel today without having a farmer joining us. He's also the visiting scholar and sustainable food access core of the Institute for Inclusion, Inquiry, and Innovation at the Virginia Commonwealth University. He previously served as the Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry for the state of Virginia from 2016 to 2018. And as I said, he's our Black farmer on the panel today. And then finally, of course, you heard the senator refer to my friend Kate Mayer. Kate is the executive director and CEO of the Greater Chicago Food Depository, an organization that provides food for hungry people while striving to end hunger. Since 2000, and Kate has served in this post since 2006. Kate, the Chicago Food Depository, the GCFD as we familiarly call it here, is a member of the Feeding America network of food banks, the 200 food banks serving and supporting food assistance across America. Let's start with you, Emily. You recently released the report that was referred to by the senator that evaluated the Farmers to Family Food Box program. Can you briefly talk about your report's findings, specifically some of the successes as well as the failures or opportunities that you identified for this program? And as Secretary Vilsack settles in again at USDA, what would you suggest that he do to improve the program?
Thank you so much, Earthren and the Chicago Council for organizing. And I have to say a big thank you to Senator Durbin, even though he's now not with us anymore, because he actually, did a really nice job articulating some of the findings of the report, which was a big honor. So our report came out in January. We published it in partnership with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. And I think it's relevant because there were sort of some very real kind of goals that we had to investigate in doing this research. So, because of their work, we were very interested in the impact of the program on local and regional food systems, on small and mid-sized farmers, and on minority and women-owned farms. Because of our longstanding work in food waste and food recovery, we were curious about the claims when the program was launched around how it would impact food waste. And then, of course, on both of our organizations, we're really concerned about the food access and the recipient side of it. So those are the three kind of things we were looking at. We thought we would be interviewing a few folks, and we ended up in the research really talking to 30 different stakeholders, which included distributors, such as Melissa, farmers who both participated and who did not, but were attempting to participate. We talked to food banks, we talked to Feeding America, local government. We got a lot of perspectives on what was working and what wasn't. And I think I'll really echo the senator's perspective on some of the successes. I mean, overall, people were really happy that this program existed and really grateful. And I have to give a huge kudos to USDA because they did so much work to roll this out, like on a dime, without planning. This was new. And they got millions of boxes out. 154 million boxes have been distributed. Jobs were maintained on farms and distributors. There was a lot of, it created a lot of community networks that were doing food distribution that hadn't existed before. Couple critiques, I think, of the program. One was really that small, mid-sized, minority and women-owned farms were really left out of the program, especially from round 3 on. So where there were actually many that were included at the very beginning, as USDA was trying to respond to some critiques of the program, like the cost of boxes, they, I think, really focused a lot more on price as being the main goal, and then left out a lot of these producers, and I think in ways that were really unfair and kind of played on the systemic discrimination that have been prevalent in the food system. Boxes weren't always distributed equitably, like there wasn't a master plan about where they would go. And I don't think that they really reduce food waste. So I'll tell you 3 quick recommendations and then we'll move on. One was really that there are a lot of opportunities to prioritize small, mid-sized, minority and women-owned farms. They can be very clearly prioritized as bonus points for distributors who are applying for the contracts. There can be better reporting. So the distributors should be asking for reporting on the racial, ethnic, gender, et cetera, makeup of the farmers they're working with so that we can track that progress. And I will say there was a report also put out by our friends that the higher rates of satisfaction from boxes that came from more local and regional food systems. Next is just ensuring that there's more precise and equitable targeting of distribution. And I think we can talk more about this. I don't want to steal the thunder of some of the other panelists, but we had to throw something together for this emergency, but now in hindsight, there were, I think, better ways to do that. And especially when contracts change hands between distributors, it was really disruptive, and USDA can play a role in kind of smoothing that out. And then lastly, I think doing more oversight and enforcement of accountability for the distributors. And I think this played out often. The nonprofits knew what was going wrong, like they weren't getting enough money for last dollar distribution, or the boxes weren't the quality. So really actually looking at past performance and then having better systems of accountability so that we're giving those contracts to organizations that are really doing everything that they say they're doing and keeping all the players happy. I could say a lot more, but we're tight on time, so I will cede back to you, Arthur.
Terrific. And Kate, I go right to you from there because you were a distributor to communities as a part of this program. And so Emily's outlined some of the challenges. I'd love to have you build on some of the findings that she articulated, but also to speak to the concern that's been raised by many, particularly minority organizations, community organizations, about their abilities or lack of ability to participate in the program and how we can do better. Over to you.
Well, thank you. And I'll echo a lot of what Emily said, starting with my thanks to the council, to you, Erthrin. You have been a fierce advocate for this conversation for a long time. And then, of course, it was really fantastic having the senator here. I would agree with Emily. And I'll just start. There are certainly things that could have, that are opportunities for improvement. Mm-hmm. But this program made an extraordinary impact. In Chicago, we got 35 million pounds of food to people in need because of this program. And I can't even imagine what would have happened without it. Mm-hmm. Are there things that we can do better? Absolutely. I would say as a overarching theme, I think probably most of the planning, even though we didn't have a lot of time, was placed on thinking about who are the producers that we were working with. And there was very little time spent thinking about what do we do to make sure that this food ultimately gets to the individuals who need it. And that last mile is complicated and expensive. And I'll just say for the food depository, we have raised money privately to give grants to the community organizations that needed to do this. There was no funding from USDA for that, and that was a real challenge. I would also say that the continued, there were all of these adjustments that kept getting made, which meant that you had to keep restarting the program. And there were a lot of administrative challenges with that. As it relates to who the producers are, I couldn't agree with your point, or the point that you've raised, Earthren, more, which is I think we have to be inclusive and equitable. We know that this is an opportunity to strengthen important food systems, and that matters to the future of this city and to cities and rural communities all across this country. And so I think to be able to really think about how do we build on this in the future, that becomes a really important opportunity. I'll just also note that picking up on what the senator said, this is a really important program, but it is only one of the tools in the arsenal in the fight against hunger. And I'll just note, we had a crisis before the crisis of COVID. If we would have been having this conversation before March of 2020, I would have told you that we were in a crisis, because before COVID, we were serving 800,000 people in Cook County. What happened when COVID descended upon this community is that it had immediately skyrocketed. And by May, we were serving 120% more people. The numbers are absolutely staggering. What I worry about is we are going to get through this. We are going to get vaccinations. We are going to begin to open up. Our economy is going to recover, but we are still going to have people facing food insecurity. And we need to remember that we still need to invest in solutions. I think this program can be a solution, but at the end of the day, we need SNAP. We need the pandemic EBT program for children. We need to continue to invest in WIC and other proven solutions that make sure that families and children have access to food.
So we will get back to normal. As someone who's been vaccinated, I can tell you, looking forward to hugging each one of you, and but keeping this conversation alive, as you said, Kate. Let me go to Basil. Basil, you are a farmer. And over the past 4 years, we know that farmers have been hard hit by turbulent trading relationships, and where there used to be stability in our agricultural community. On top of that, climate change has made harvest less and less predictable. And some argue that Black and women-owned farmers have been hard hit by those activities. And now, when we see programs coming online to address those challenges, those are the farmers that are often left out, whether it's be the trading programs, the response to climate change programs, or now the farm to box program. How can Secretary Vilsack make good on his promise to be more inclusive, starting with this program for Black and brown farmers, as well as for small and women-owned farmers? And are there innovative ways you've seen farmers be more connected with communities that USDA should consider as pilots for how we might, as they say, build back better?
Well, thank you so much, Earthren. I really do appreciate. I want to echo the sentiments of the panelists that went before me. Thank you so much for convening this discussion, and certainly having Senator Durbin address these issues, vitally important across the United States. First, let me say, my family and I, we are beef cattle farmers here in the state of Virginia. And I will give comments from the perspective of certainly a producer, but I will fully disclose I was not able or did not participate in the farm to family box program. but really sought out a lot of information from individuals who did, and some individuals who attempted to, but were unable to do that. As you know, the program had a lot of changes from the start of the program. And I do want to, again, echo the sentiments that this program has been very impactful to a lot of producers across the United States. And I do want to give credit to those that identified some areas that we could do a lot better in administering the program and the accountability. But the issue I want to focus on is, as you raise, really including more minorities, Black-owned farms, indigenous farms, and farms led by women. So, as you know, there were several issues, and you can read the report certainly from Harvard to, and it shows some of these issues as to why some of these smaller farms were left out. Certainly in the United States, Black farmers only make up less than 2%. And of that, of the Black farmers, only about 5% of the 1.4% of the overall farmers, only 5% are farmers that actually grow vegetables and melons and things like that were able to additionally participate in the food box program. And then when meat and was able to be added and things of that nature, then more Black farmers and small farmers were able to join that, because almost about 50% of Black farmers in the United States are actually beef cattle farmers or livestock farmers as well. So, but you asked the question about innovative ways to really address this issue. As you may know, on March the 25th, Chairman David Scott of the House Ag Committee convened a hearing of the state of Black farmers. And on that panel, he had outstanding panelists providing testimony to Congress. And you had Cornelius Blanding, chairman of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, that work with Black farmers. And actually, that is a story that you read about, that their contract with this program was denied as this program went along. And you just hear stories about Black farmers and smaller farmers not being able to take advantage, as some of the other farmers have throughout the inception of this program. So some things that I think that Secretary Vilsack could really focus on, and he's really starting in this direction, and I'm very excited about that. He certainly has on his staff, he appointed Dr. Dwayne Goldman, who is a senior advisor for equity, diversity, and inclusion, really to focus on systemic racism that may be within USDA and external to USDA. And having worked at USDA, I can tell you there are some issues that really need to be really addressed and rooted out within USDA. But again, I think we all are on the same page, really trying to provide opportunities for producers and farmers across the United States. I also think that a focus on food policy across the United States is needed, and certainly conversations like this will certainly push that along. And also, I also feel that this current administration, President Biden, could really focus on by having a food czar, or someone that can really focus on food policy directly within that administration. Again, it's all about leadership. And one thing that we know within the food system, although Blacks and women have been a part of the food system since the inception of this country, when we look at the leadership roles, that it's very few and far between with Blacks and women. And we really need to have efforts to get more Blacks, more women, people of color in leadership roles, not only as farmers and producers, but in leadership roles. And so I'm happy to see that one of my colleagues, Dr. Jewel Brownell, will actually be at USDA as the deputy secretary there. But we just need more women, more minorities to be in these discussions. And there are a plethora of Blacks and women that could serve in these leadership roles at USDA, within the administration, but in private food companies as well. And so we just really need to diversify the leadership roles. And I think we will be able to address a lot of these issues that we're talking about today.
Mhm.
So-
I couldn't agree with you more on getting more Blacks in leadership roles. And it's interesting that just this year, a new organization that I know you're aware of was started, Blacks in Food and Agriculture Policy. And I was proud that I'm a senior member of that organization. And there's so many young people now coming up who are leading in this space, both on the Hill and in the administration. So hopefully we can begin to see some of those changes that you've just described. Melissa, over to you. You as the leader of a large association that was very much involved as a distributor and a contractor in the Farm to Box program. You accomplished a lot. But you and I met because there was a challenge with organizations who were community organizations that were participating in the program with one contractor, and in the next round, when the contractor changed, they were no longer able to participate in that program. So we saw those kinds of challenges in the operation of the program, but we also saw successes. And so I'd like to hear from your point of view as a successful contractor for this program, representing many farmers, what you saw as the accomplishments of the program from the standpoint of farmers, distributors, as well as the communities that you worked with.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that the program overall, and it's great to hear it from so many people, was a win-win-win, which has been said a lot. But I think you hit it on the nail on the head right away. The community organizations and so many other organizations were able to be a part of this program. So working with the Greater Chicago Food Depository and many Feeding America food banks was wonderful. And we also were able to work with mutual aid societies and City Serve and other really newer organizations that had done this or done it for a long time, but they were able to receive it. Also, the people receiving the food, there was other means testing, but they were different than some of the traditional programs. So during this time of crisis, people were able to get food quicker than they would with some of the other traditional programs. So I think that was also a very important part of the Farmers to Family Food Box program. As far as our distributors, this kept the light on. There was over 21,000 payroll hours per week that was created because of this program, 600 employees. So in a time when food service, as we talked about those two highways that didn't intersect, this was a very important program and one that we were able to save a lot of contracts and a lot of product that would have otherwise gone unused. So I think that was another really big, a very big positive of this program. I think that as we've talked about many times, there are things that could be changed, and we talked about a lot of those today. But I think that like when we've done private funding boxes, there are specs that can look different, and we can look at changing some of those items to maybe make different cultural boxes, or to change some of the items inside so that they change out the different chicken each week or different pork, some of those things, so that other communities can be a part of it, or they get more excited for the boxes that are coming. But I think that the program at large was a success for the different parts of it, the farmers, the distributors, and those that were in need. And overall, it was a really great program.
So it was a really great program. And we heard the senator say, this is something the Trump administration got right. And so we need to give them credit for that. But should it now be made permanent? Kate, I'm coming back to you because the senator wanted you to answer this question. And if so, what's the one thing that you would see needing to change that would make it better for the communities with which you work?
So I think one of the things that would really help is to also leverage off the success of some other existing USDA programs. So we talk about this, that there was a little bit of, things were happening quickly. We were making these changes going on. There wasn't as much connection on the ground. And I think I look at the existing TFAP program where a lot of this has been figured out, and there are some really great successes. There's also some evolutions. As Melissa said, I think some of the flexibility of this program we need to see continuing. So worrying less about means testing and making sure that people can get food, I think is a good thing. I do think coordinating with existing networks like the Feeding America networks ensures that you have people on the ground who can connect quickly with individuals in need is important. And it also ultimately prevents food waste. There were some moments where lots of people were getting boxes of food and they didn't know that, you know, there was a distribution happening around the corner. And so having some working with known organizations that have a presence on the ground. And then ultimately, as great as these boxes were, there is a challenge in that they don't give people choice. And it was important to be able to move boxes quickly during a pandemic. But at the end of the day, we want people to have choice. And so to think about evolving this in a way that people can choose their own food, fresh produce is so needed. And so to be able to continue to make that investment, but to do it in a way that honors people's dignity, their ability to make a choice, which also, by the way, can prevent food waste. And it was really difficult. Some of these boxes were so big and so heavy, particularly for older adults or people with mobility challenges or disabilities. We know that they were taking these boxes, unpacking and leaving half the food there. So I think those are some of the improvements we would like to see. Of course, we would also like to see the extension in the SNAP increase, because that is a critical partner to this program. And so we're hopeful that these changes will go forward.
Terrific. And those changes that have been articulated so well by Kate, Emily, let me come over to you and back to your report. Is there anything that we haven't touched on today that, if we were to make this program permanent, should be considered?
So I want to really echo what Kate is saying about the fact that I think we need to really think about how this program fits in within the kind of menu of programs. And I think, to me, really where I go with that point is that things like SNAP, making sure more people can access it, increasing the adequacy of the benefit. I'm also supportive of making school meals universal, which was something we did this year, and it just makes sense. Why spend all the administrative dollars checking who's eligible and who's not eligible? We spend more money doing that than we would spend actually feeding everyone. My thought on this program is it taught us something really amazing that is, this was surprising to me, but USDA doesn't actually distribute fresh product in any of its programs. When it has done that, it's had to partner with other agencies. So what I think we learned is that USDA can do this. It's good for distributors and good for farmers and producers. It's good for recipients. Like, as Kate said, people want fresh produce. So I think, to me, it's really, continuing this because people are really relying on it, but then leveraging it into findings that we can plug into other programs. And again, I think if we are going to really deliver food to people, it should be healthy food. And also we should be really thinking about using every dollar we spend on that to reinvest in farmers and producers that, as much as possible, that have been subject to discrimination and haven't had a fair opportunity to be successful. So I don't think we're there yet. Right now, we're still in this crisis, but I think there's a lot we've learned that we can now use to, build from this program to really support those producers we talked about and get fresh food into the hands of people that need it.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. And just building on that very comprehensive response, Emily, let me go to you, Basil, because I've leaned on your expertise as a farmer, but I don't want to understate the importance of your participation in this conversation as an academic, as well as a policy leader in the food and agriculture space. And then from that standpoint, I would love to hear your, and I think our audience would appreciate your thoughts regarding how we might use this program and making it permanent to address the challenges, the historical and well-documented challenges that Black farmers in particular have had with USDA, and the shrinking and the reduction in the number of Black farmers over the decades, that we might be able to see more productive Black farmers making a living from their farms and not being forced to sell their farms. Do you see this as an opportunity? And if so, what can this program do to make that difference?
Well, thank you. And yes, I see this program as being able to make a difference. But I want to agree with the panelists and things that Emily said as well, is that I think what this has really shown us is that the government and USDA can make things happen when there is a dire need to make things happen. And so systems can change. I mean, that's what COVID showed us, is that systems can change. People can do things differently. We can change the distribution system, and we can change funding streams to producers and farmers across the United States. So things can change, and there are ways that we can, again, make these changes that are effective if again, evaluated, that these things are really making a difference. I mean, one thing, as a farmer, and I'll just throw this out there, every farmer, every producer knows that if they had so for example, we raise cattle. If I had a calf that lost its mother during birth, I would have to give that calf different attention. I would have to bottle feed that calf. I would have to, focus all the energy on this calf that, lost its mother. Well, a lot of minority and Black farmers across the United States feel that they have been shut out of USDA, that they can't avail themselves to a lot of the same programs that a lot of the larger farmers and a lot of the white farmers are availed to. So just as a farmer can pay special attention to a calf to make sure that everything is working well on their farms, USDA can do the same thing. They can focus specific attention on smaller farmers that may not have been given the same opportunities as some of the other farmers to participate in this program. Not only this program, but other programs at USDA and across the government. So farmers understand that. There's a way to really, articulate that and pass that along. So yes, there are ways that this program can be made permanent. And I think communicating that either to farmers and to this administration is our first big step in trying to move that forward.
So we are out of time, and it's been an amazing conversation. I knew this would go really fast. Melissa, if you have 1 minute of comments that you think your producers need to hear to ensure that their voices are represented in the how do we go forward, please give us that comment.
I just think that at the end of the day, I think Kate said it too. I think it's about collaboration. I think it's work with the expertise of each person and each group along the supply chain and figure out how can we all work together on this. And I just thank you for having this conversation, because it's been an amazing year of darkness that led to some light. So thank you.
Well, what a great note to end on, collaboration. And this is a team that has succeeded because of your commitment to collaboration and partnership and making a difference in this space to ensure that no Americans go hungry. And I want to thank you on behalf of the Chicago Council for joining us today, and to all of our viewers and listeners. This program will be recorded, and we invite you to share it, because this is an important dialogue, because this program, as you've heard today, should be made permanent. With that, to Kate, to Emily, to Melissa, to Basil, thank you very much.